My name is Elizabeth Faeder. Today is May 9th, 2018, on a Wednesday morning. I am here interviewing Melvyn Bernstein, and along with him we have Barbara Bernstein as well. So the first question I'll go ahead and ask, okay, is your full name, and you can go ahead and introduce your wife and talk about the names of your parents and any children you might have as well.
Well, my name is Melvyn Bernstein, and my wife's name is Barbara Bernstein. My parents' name were Meyer and Esther Bernstein. And Bob?
I don't remember what my mother's name was. It was Smith, because that's my grandparents.
I need to interject that Barbara has Alzheimer's, and I love her to talk, but when she doesn't remember, I'm going to chime in and help her out. So Barbara's parents' name were Ruth,
right, and
Julie, I believe.
Yeah, and he was really not counted.
Okay.
In my life.
Okay.
So.
What about any children you guys have?
Yeah, I had a brother, but he passed away.
Mm-hmm. But our children, who do we have? Our children.
Okay, so we have Josh, and we have Josh and.
That's okay.
I know. Too many. No, we only three.
Oh, fantastic.
We have Josh, and we have Jesse, and Jesse is in California.
And you have one more child.
Yes, I have one more child. I had another child, Jed, and he passed away.
Sorry.
He passed away. He was an incredible athletic person, and he had a heart attack.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
So he's the only one that we lost. Thank God.
When and where
By the way,
oh, sorry.
Our lives have been extremely dramatic. And that's not to say that everybody's life doesn't have drama in it, but we're kind of in the 99.9 percentile of drama.
Understand. When and where were you born?
Well, I was born, if the date doesn't get out, I'll tell you. I was born September 3rd, 1945. And Bob, when were you born?
April 15th, 1943.
Both born in Brooklyn, New York.
In a hospital. Gotta throw that in.
That was a good joke.
And how did they go from New York to Brooklyn to Dallas, Texas? How did that establish?
Want to try that?
Yeah, the hospital I was in Brooklyn, and my mother, of course, brought me back to Flushing, New York, and I stayed there for a while. I lived there. I went to Flushing school in Flushing, high school, and then I kind of left that area because there was nothing going on, and my mother I think she died also at that time. And so I was just, I don't know where I was really at that point, really. I don't know where I was. I had a lot of friends, and everybody was very, very nice to me because we had very nice friends at that time. We still do.
So Barbara was born in Brooklyn, spent some time in Brooklyn where her grandparents owned a candy store, which she loved. And she worked in the candy store. She didn't do much of anything, but she got paid in candy. And she loved her grandparents, George and Anna Smith.
They were wonderful people.
And they were wonderful people. And then her parents, her mother, her father left early, moved them to Flushing, and her brother Jeffrey lived in Flushing for many years through high school. Barbara went to Flushing High School.
Right.
And when Barbara was a young woman already working in New York City, Flushing is only a couple of subway stops away from New York, we met. I was born, my parents were Meyer and Esther Bernstein. He moved us from Brooklyn to Queens. Queens at that time was like Plano was 25 years ago, just starting out, and homes were very inexpensive, so he bought a home in Bayside, Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to high school in Queens, Francis Lewis High School. It was the first year of the high school, and I graduated, and then I went on to Queens College. Barbara also spent a semester at Queens College.
Yeah, but I didn't like it at all, and I said, I don't need it.
Now, if I sneeze, do we edit it? No, I'm sorry. That was just a little bit of a joke.
No,
and I was about to sneeze.
No, I laughed, so it's okay. We both laughed.
And I went to Queens College, and I graduated with a theater and communication arts and sciences program. And I'll stop there and let you ask another question.
So you went from Queens. How did you make your way over to Dallas, to Texas? New York and Texas is pretty far way out. So how did you jump from New York all the way to Texas?
You met me.
Oh yeah, that's how.
No, I actually met her in a bar, which is a whole other story, but a very beautiful story.
Yeah.
The way Barbara and I are married over 50 years. We know each other 54 years. It took her 3 years to land me. And because I was in college at the time, and I needed to graduate college before I even thought of marriage. What was the thought? Oh, how did we get to Dallas, Texas?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we immediately became entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah, right.
I, for some crazy reason, did not want to work for anybody. I think it was because I watched my father work so hard, and this was in the the 40s and
He had lovely parents.
50s, and my parents are beautiful people. They're not with us anymore, and extremely generous people. And as a high schooler, my father says, "Why don't you come work in the printing business in New York on 6th Avenue and 17th Street, and I'll teach you the business." Well, I went there as a messenger. That's where you start off. I would bring samples of printing all the way up to Madison Avenue, which is where the advertising of the world was on Madison Avenue in New York City. But many times I fell asleep on a curb, and he would have to say to me, "Why did it take you 3 hours to deliver this and come back?" And I was fired very quickly. And we became entrepreneurs, Barbara and I. And the odd thing about it is that everything that I suggested to her, she went along with. And I think the true definition of an entrepreneur is you get an idea and you do it. And you fail. But the failure motivates you to do another idea. And you form that idea, and hopefully it gets to a point where it becomes a business. At the time of about 1985, we had a retail store in a town called Cedarhurst, Long Island. It was on the south shore of Long Island. We were already married, and we had 3 sons, and they were all going to either public school, junior high school, and high school in Hewlett.
Oh, Hewlett, right.
Yes. And we had a famous store. We called it the Chambered Nautilus, after a famous seashell. And the reason why we did that, and please, Liz, stop me, because I am a talker. Okay. And the reason why we named it the Chambered Nautilus is because we had just the previous year opened up a thatched roof store on the ocean in the Hamptons, a town called Amagansett, Long Island. And what we did was, one of the way we just started businesses is I would just say, I would love to have a business here. I would go into the owner and say, can I sell seashells on your front lawn for the summertime? And this was at the famous farmer's market in Amagansett. There was only one. And everybody from every Hampton town, Southampton, East Hampton, Bridgehampton, Montauk, they all came there because behind the market was their farm. And everything was fresh farm produced. And they had a family of cooks and bakers, and it was an extraordinary, extraordinary place. And people came who were just average people, and people came who were the stars of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Because out there, Ralph Lauren had a home here, Steven Spielberg over here, Clint Eastwood over there.
It was crazy.
And it was very, very exciting for us. And we, the owner, Pat Struck, said, yes, that would be a great idea. So I came back to the car, and I remember telling her, because she said, don't do it, you'll embarrass yourself. She'll only say no, and she'll think you're an idiot. And we did that. We did that for 3 summers.
It was wonderful. Every summer was wonderful.
And it was at the zenith of life. We were young. We didn't have a care in the world. Our children were healthy. We were healthy. I hired some high schoolers to run the seashell business, and we sold seashells and coral. And I was a craftsman. I made seashell mirrors in there. And the whole deal was, when someone was going to dinner, i.e. Ralph Lauren, he would come and buy a beautiful piece of coral because he was going to Clint Eastwood's house for dinner. And then when Clint Eastwood would go and reciprocate to, let's say, Steven Spielberg, he would come in and buy a piece of coral or a beautiful shell. So we had a famous shop there right out of the box.
Yeah, it was great.
We had fame.
We were invited to everything that they had out there.
Yeah, and we became friends with all these people.
Yeah.
And they all lived on a compound that was owned by Mrs. Tyson. She was the owner of Kentile Floors. Back in the 50s and 40s, every floor was a plastic. They have them today too, plastic tiles, but they had a brand name called Kentile. So it wasn't called a plastic tile, it was called a Kentile. And we met a whole ton of people because they bought a product from us.
That was the only place they could buy, because that was the only store.
Yeah, we were the only shell shop in town, and this was in the late 60s to early 70s. Then the school system was very poor there, and so we decided we could not live there and didn't want to live there, because everybody at that time left the Hamptons to go back to New York City or Jersey or wherever and work. But skipping many years, we opened up another Chambered Nautilus on a street called Central Avenue in Cedarhurst, which was the mecca of shopping in Long Island. And we started off as a seashell store, but we ended up as a gift store for both children and adults, a fun store. And in the 70s, there was a fad that a child had to have his name on everything. Shoelaces, a baby's bracelet, barrettes, t-shirts, and we had that store.
And we went out to California to get that store.
Yes, Barbara was the buyer. She was such a superb buyer. And we went all over the United States. We heard about a craftsman, let's say in Rhinebeck, New York.
We went there too.
We went there too, or we went to Santa Fe, who we heard someone had gourds, was making these incredible gourds, and we visited them because we were kind of in the money then. The shop was very successful. And so we...
And that's what we did in the summertime.
No, actually, we did only Amagansett in the summertime.
Okay.
And then we moved back to New York, and I wanted to be an actor. And I got married at 21, and Barbara was 23. And we had 3 children immediately. So I was a child who had 3 children. And we literally, and you've heard this before, we literally rose them by the seat of their pants, or the seat of our pants, or the seat of someone's pants. We did an okay job. And
You did a great job.
that remains to be seen. I'm critical of myself now in my later years, but all 3 children were very successful. And I'm sorry, Liz, please shut me up.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to.
And so I had already told you, and Barbara, you chime in, please.
Yeah.
I had already told you that when I was in college, I took theater.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I graduated college, I entered a place called the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York. The teacher was Sanford Meisner. He was a member of the group theater in the 40s, which later became the Actors Studio.
Right.
The Actors Studio was the place where all great actors went to experiment on their art. So I started off at Sandy Meisner's class, and he asked me to teach. So I started teaching at Sandy Meisner's class, and then I had no idea how to enter the industry because my parents were workers, and my brother was in the garment center, and my sister was already married to a girdle manufacturer in Brooklyn, a very successful girdle manufacturer. They used to call them foundations, not girdles. And so she was set in life. I also have to say that she was a beautiful, beautiful woman with a heart of gold and most generous, who also passed away very early in life.
She was wonderful.
She was the greatest person. And so losing her was our first hole in our heart.
What was her name?
Her name was Sandra Bernstein, Sandy Sass. Sass was her nickname, Bernstein.
Did you two belong in a congregation or synagogue in New York? Or did your
Well,
family?
yes.
Okay.
The name of the synagogue was Bayside Synagogue, and my father helped build that because in New York in 1950, there were not many Jewish people. Queens at that time was in fact a melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
Our neighbors were Greek, Italian, Yugoslavian, Jewish, and it was a beautiful atmosphere because all your friends were of different religions. There was no such thing, well, there was an enclave in New York, but it was in the Lower East Side. And then in Manhattan, the very, very rich Jewish people lived. They always lived there. As a matter of fact, the very rich of the Jewish people started off in Harlem because it was kind of countrified. And George and Ira Gershwin lived in Harlem and wrote Porgy and Bess somewhere in Harlem, in a beautiful, beautiful home. But when you move to Queens or you move to Staten Island, I'm sorry, Brooklyn was an enclave. Brooklyn was a Jewish enclave in the 40s and the 50s, but Queens was not. It was a brand new borough. I started acting at the neighborhood playhouse. I went out to try to get commercials, and I landed my first national commercial. And that was Eric the Red cigars. People were smoking cigarillos. And I was a Viking on a Viking ship going down the Hudson with a blonde lady at my back. And I had no words, and I was just simply smoking my cigarillo. Anyway, the commercial, and it was, we did that to fight Marlboro. There was the Marlboro man, and everybody smoked Marlboro. And my campaign was quite successful. It was renewed 3 times, and that's really, I became lazy. We would open up the mailbox, and there'd be residual checks in there. And so I faltered at a commercial, in the commercial industry, although I did several. I did Great Tang. I did a lot of new products. Mm-hmm. And then I decided I have to get into this. Then I went to acting school. Everybody goes to acting school. I studied with Uta Hagen. I studied with, again, Sanford Meisner. And then I studied with a couple of, and I have to stop and say, my wife worked to support me. And what job did you get?
Oh, I got a great job.
What was it?
I got a job for my first job there.
Yes. It was a movie studio. What was the name of the studio?
Yeah, I can't recall.
She worked for Columbia Pictures.
Oh, yeah.
For the Vice President Eli Horowitz.
Yes.
At 555 Fifth Avenue.
Yes, I worked for him. And again, he was very, very popular. This president that was, he was the president of
He was the Vice President of New York, of the New York chapter, L.A., New
Sort
York.
of. Anyway, he said, this is the way it's going. We have people, all the actors and actresses come up through us, and so you gotta You relax when they come in, don't get over, you know. So I said, okay, don't worry about me, I'll be fine.
And what was your job? Like as we came in, Liz and everybody asked us if we wanted coffee or soda or water. What was your job when you met Natalie Wood?
Oh, God, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. I loved her, and she died. But anyway, I got into getting just a little bit more into some friends. You know, when you start like that, you get friends when they come up, and you know, because we were on like the second floor, they had to come up. So anytime they came up, I had told the girl that was waiting downstairs, that was her job. She called me on the phone. She said, "Guess who's coming up?" I said, "Who?" She could say maybe Tony so-and-so or
Tony Curtis.
Everybody came up. So I saw everybody. And it was a lot of fun.
And you greeted everybody.
Everyone.
And why were they up there?
Because of me.
Well, that's true. That's absolutely true. But what was the second reason why they were up there? For a specific reason?
I know, I can't think of the specific, because we were going to do something.
Well, they were going to see a screening of their film in privacy.
Oh, yeah. That's you.
And they all came up there to see the screening, the film, in this most beautiful, luxurious screening room. And it was her job to sit there just in case they needed something. And I was invited to every screening by Eli Horowitz. I used to come to pick Barbara up, and we became not friends, but I was so in awe of him, and he knew that I wanted to be an actor, so he did everything in his power to make me comfortable and to help me.
And he did.
He did. He opened up doors for me, which I immediately closed. For whatever crazy reason, I closed them.
That was great, you know, but I started getting very friendly with a lot of the, you know, not just the actors, but just friends that would coming up, and because they wanted to meet them too.
Yeah.
You know,
But you worked for young lawyers.
I did.
One of which opened a company called HBO.
Oh, right, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And every lawyer up there became someone extremely famous in the industry. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Let me go back a little bit, because I wanted to be an actor, but I was very unsuccessful. And across the street from Fifth Avenue, there was a bookstore called Rizzoli. Rizzoli was the most famous bookstore in the world for printing an entire soft-covered book of Rembrandt with 20 or 30 magnificent 18 by 12 pictures of Rembrandt and Van Gogh and Picasso and Miro and every great artist that you could think of. So while I was waiting for Barbara, I used to walk around Rizzoli, and I said, I'm going to make something with these books.
And he did.
And I went home and I experimented. At that time, distressing and decoupage was in. Everybody did decoupage, which was the covering of a picture with an old finish or a shellac, so it looked old, it looked more authentic. You could also get a fixative that would make it look somewhat like a canvas. It made it look a little bumpy. So I took these pictures and I mounted them on a board a little bit bigger than the picture, so it had like a frame. And then I distressed the board by banging it with an axe and a hammer and a chain. I stained the board, and then I glued the picture, centered it on the board, and then I put upholstery tacks around the picture. So we knew of a place in Greenwich Village on 6th Avenue and 8th Street. I don't know if you know anything about that, but that was the center of the hippie world in the 60s. And we used to drive down there, and there was one fence that you could hang your wares on, and the policeman wouldn't bother you. But if the action started at sundown, because everybody was home from work, and they took a walk around Greenwich Village. And so you had to get there around 3 in the afternoon to get a spot on the fence. Well, we got a spot on the fence, and I hung up these Van Goghs and all these things, and the first night we sold every single picture. We sold them for like $12 a picture. So there were 20, and we made $240 that night, which was a ton of money at that time. And we went back, and that's the way I contributed to her salary as a, I don't want to call her a secretary. She was a vice president assistants. And so then I said, boy, people are buying them in Manhattan. Why don't we get in the car? I'll load up the car with 100 pictures, and we'll drive to the seashore, and I'll look for a restaurant or a gift shop. And that's what we did for many years. And we sold out every single time. So that was truly our first successful venture. And
Well, then I know the second one is
what was the second one?
when you, what do you call it, somebody saw your work and they wanted you to be on
Oh, well, that's a different story.
Well, it's
I'm
part-
sorry.
it's part of it.
You picked the wrong
It's-
people.
No.
because when we had our well, first of all, when we weren't working, our parents bought a home in Florida. They were called snowbirds at that time. In the winter, they would go down to Florida, and in the hot summer, they would come back to New York. So our generous parents, I call them our because they were truly, truly Barbara and Barbara's parents also. They were not her father-in-law and the mother. They were her father and mother. And that was definitely some of the glue that kept us together, because it was like she would be divorcing her father and her mother to get rid of me, which she wanted to do many times. And but we always settled every problem we had. We settled every problem, and I was not an easy man. I was volatile. I was artist crazy. I literally only had one side of my brain. It wasn't as if the other were weak. I only had a craftsman, artist brain, and I had the temperament to go with that. And while we were selling so my parents bought this home in Florida. We went down to Florida. I said, what are we going to do to make money? And I got a job at a company, I don't remember how, called Tropical Biological. And she was a seashell importer. And I got the job of opening up the containers, these huge containers that are on a ship the size of this room. My job was to put on heavy rubber aprons, heavy rubber gloves, a big mask, cover my whole body, because when I opened up the container, it was full of seashells, but the animals were still in there. And the smell,
That I didn't know.
the smell I cannot even replicate, even if I knew every word.
So he picked them up and he killed them?
No, I picked them up, I had to clean them, I had to acidize them, I had to dip them in coral. I learned where the brain was in each shell, that when you hit the brain, the animal actually dropped out. So I had that job, and I was outside doing it, and at that time, the sun cancer was not even in the vernacular, and I was as brown as, I was just brown, and everybody was brown. Everybody was sunbathing at the time. And so this woman came to me, Mrs. M, and she said she's divorcing her husband. She took us out to dinner one night. Barbara didn't eat. She got sick. Why? Because you were pregnant with Josh. And she ordered shrimp, and she ate one shrimp, and she got sick.
Oh, I remember that.
I'll never forget that.
I remember exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. I was sitting opposite.
In this fine restaurant.
Yeah, with maybe a couple or somebody else, not just you.
No, it was just me, you, and Mrs. M.
Oh, that's the other person.
Right.
Okay. And so, yeah, okay.
And forgive me, again, I'll apologize 1,000 times for digressing, because I got to tell you that our life, I really believe that our life is a unique life. It is true, and I don't know why. I don't know why.
And we're not finished yet.
I actually haven't even begun yet. And so we went to my...
The best part is hanging now. The best part.
Okay, well, and forgive my arms, because I work with driftwood, huge pieces of driftwood.
With the printing company, correct?
With who?
With your printing company. Right?
Well, I have a printing company, that's besides that.
Oh.
But I've gotten into driftwood, and sometimes in order to get it, I bang my hand and I take Lasix, so I can just do this and get a mark. So that's not an infectious disease. Anyway, we went to my parents' house. Oh, we came home from New York, and we were in New York, and we were passing a store, and I forget the name of the store. And he had the most beautiful, we loved antiques. We loved old world things, and we would have nothing new in our home. And we started collecting lamps. Not Tiffany, we couldn't afford Tiffany, but we could afford Handels and Pearpoints and Bradley and Hubner. And these were magnificent leaded lamps or blown lamps. So we passed a store one day, and I see a mirror, the most magnificent shell mirror. And I said, I can do that. I can do that if I only had the shells. So when we moved down to Florida, I said, I'm going to find these shells. And we found them. And I went to a carpenter store, and I said, I'd like you to make me a carpenter shop. I'd like you to make me an oval frame with like a 6 or 8 inch face, and make it out of one piece with a bevel in the back so I can fit a mirror. And I made a frame, and I sold it. We sold it to one of the large department stores, furniture stores, called Blum's. And then Freed's was in Florida. So I made a second and a third frame, and we sold those. We sold every frame we made. And Barbara was my partner and assistant, and she would choose shells that she thought would go together, because later on in her life, as we found out, she was an expert designer that dealt with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and hooked them into allowing our small company to provide art for their 500,000 square foot facility when they moved to Dallas, Texas. And so the story that she's talking about is I had mirrors in the back of my thatched hut in Amagansett, a block from the beach. And a guy comes in one day, and I had a really beautiful oval mirror of flamingo's teeth, which are a beautiful orange, and I had yellow tree snails, and I had white coral, and I had Mexican deeps, which are this beautiful brown color, and I was excellent at color. So he came in and he said, that frame, can you get it to New York by Monday morning? I am from New York Magazine, and we are writing an article, a summer article, about the world's best shell craftsmen. And I'm not guaranteeing you that your mirror is going to be in there, because we have mirrors coming in, being shipped in from all over the world. The most famous of which was a man called William Redmond from England, and he made rooms out of shells. The armoires were shells, the chairs were shells, everything was shells. And I'll make this long story. Well, I'll skip the way I got in. She was pregnant, so I could not take the car. And so I packed this shell up, this frame up, and when I packed it up, it looked like an enormous turtle shell. And I strapped it to my back, and I walked from our house, which was in a place called the Springs, to Montauk Highway, and I put my thumb out, and a trucker stopped. He said, where are you going? I said, Manhattan, which was 150 miles away. He says, hop in. I said, where can you take me, in Manhattan? He said, I'm going through the tunnel. I'll drop you off, at the tunnel. I said, fantastic. Then I'll be a couple of miles away. I brought the thing up, and of course I made it in the magazine. And I made it as one of the world's finest shell craftsmen.
Wow.
In New York Magazine in 1970. I have not been able to get a copy. I wish I had a copy. Where am I?
Well, you moved to Florida. When did you move from New York to Florida?
Well, Florida was only a couple of months out of the year.
Okay.
Right, because it was just for, just summertime.
Yeah, and we didn't have children yet.
Okay.
But we knew we couldn't spend our life there because it wasn't our home,
Yeah.
and it was a very lazy way of living. And another way I earned money for us was they used to have coconut heads with, I don't know if you've ever seen them, with faces on them, carved faces, and they would have a certain shell as their eyes, and earrings as shells, and the mouth as shells. Well, that was called a chestnut clam. So I went to the guy and I said, where do you get your chestnut clam? He says, I hire pickers. You just wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning when the tide is in, and there's literally millions of chestnut clams. I said, what do you pay a gallon? He says, I pay $13 a gallon. I started getting up at 5 in the morning and filling bags and bags of shells, and that's another way we made a living while we were making the frames, because the frames took literally weeks to finish, deliver, get paid. Then we left Florida for Flushing, New York.
Right.
Yes. And I wanted to become, then she started working at Columbia Pictures.
Right.
And I started trying to act. I made a couple of commercials. I wasn't really that successful. I wasn't emotionally built to be an actor. I hated someone to say no to me. I hated someone to say thank you, which was the same as no. And I used to get very nervous on stage and nervous at the audition. And so I stopped that for a while. And then I said, and then I started acting school again. And I did a scene at an acting school. Rick Sevy's acting school. everybody started an acting school who knew anything about acting. So I went to Rick Sevy's one night in Manhattan. We were living in Flushing. And he said, do a scene, and I did a scene. And he said, well, you could have done this and this and this and this in the scene. I said, you know, to me, a scene is whatever the life of it is. You don't add anything to it because, to me, acting is just living on stage. You know, all of a sudden a curtain opens up, and because the curtain opens up or the camera's rolling, it doesn't mean you speak like that. You just continue living. And anyway, I never went back to that class, but a fellow followed me out. He would whistle to me. He said, finally I turned around and the guy goes, and it was a big man. His name was Bill Riley, and he was the narrative William Childs Riley, may he rest in peace. And he was the narrative film teacher at NYU Film School, the most famous film school in the world at that time. And
He was a great guy.
And we became very fast friends, and we became partners. We went out and shot guerrilla films all over New York City. One of the reasons why we did that is our cameraman was a New York City policeman, so no one ever stopped us. He knew how to tie in to electricity to every light pole in New York City. So we had electricity everywhere in the city and never needed a permit. And we shot all over New York City.
Oh, God.
And Bill's thesis was to shoot a film. And the name of the film was The Watchman. I was the star of it. I got my brother to act in it. We got all kinds of people, street people to act in it. It was in the South Bronx, which was as dangerous as Aleppo is right now. You could lose your life because you're on someone else's turf. But we had catered. We had a crew, so you cater for the crew. So anytime we saw people coming towards us, Bill, who was a master at being a human being, said, hey, you guys, come on, eat, have something to eat. So it became, every night we were there, all the natives came to eat. And they became our protective friends. No one else would hurt us. Anyway, Bill and I fell in love. We loved each other dearly. And he had trouble in life and marriage, and he came to live with us. And he was always very ill. And before Bill died, I said, Bill, I'm going to audition for the Actors Studio. I'm going to write my own scene, which is not allowed, but I'm going to give you the credit. I'm going to say, they asked me, who was this scene written by? I said, it was written by William Charles Riley at a New York film school. Everybody knew him. And I chose my brother to act in it because it was one of those sibling rivalry scenes which literally goes into a boxing match. We usually go to this place to box, and he's late, and he's a garment center person, and he's a buyer, and I'm late, and I won't tell you more than that, but he brings in this schmata, we call them then. Do you know what a schmata is? Yes. A schmata is a piece of clothing. And a schmata is literally, the definition is a rag. Yeah. So that's why when the Jewish people, when they were in the garment center, they were in the rag business, the schmata business. So I'm waiting there a half hour for him, and I have my hands taped, and of course the audience is over there. The audience is Lee Strasberg, Anna Strasberg, Penn, Shelley Winters. I'm sure these are people that you don't know. Al Pacino, And those were the...
That's what we saw when we were in.
Those were
Down
the, you don't see anything because you're on a stage and it's dark. So anyway, the scene is that my brother and I grapple. And that was easy because we grappled our whole life. But we choreographed the scene to such a dimension that it looked real. And you get a 5-minute chance. You could be stopped at 5 seconds. You're not allowed to do a soliloquy, and you're not allowed to do Shakespeare. You have to do an original scene. And they said, thank you. In the interim, while we were waiting, then we moved down to Florida, and I started making seashells. And that night, Mrs. M offered me her business, and the next day in the mail comes a letter saying, you've passed your first audition to the Actors Studio. You have one more to go, and it's on this date. And we had to go home, and I had to rehearse with my brother again, and we rehearsed, and the next letter we got was, you are now members of the Actors Studio. You are the first brothers to ever make the Actors Studio. And then we were officially on the map, but we closed that door too. I won't get into that story, but I'm a lifelong member of the Actors Studio. I know I have to start abbreviating this story. Let me just go now by, how did we get to Texas? We were famous in New York. And I was doing the newspaper, and Barbara was doing the newspaper. And I said to Barbara, I want to create a newspaper card, a card that you can personalize and not just give a Hallmark card. So I created a personalized card, and I created a point of purchase display, and we rented a booth at the Jacob Javits Convention Center.
Right.
It was their initial show. And that's 1 million square feet of gift people trying to sell their products. And we had booth, let's say, number 100, and then there were booth 952,000. Mm-hmm. And how do you get around? And we were selling a newspaper card. But I was also printing newspapers, personalizing newspapers in our personalizing store, the Chambered Nautilus in Cedarhurst. So at that time, our youngest son, Jesse, who is now a famous actor in LA, he's been there 20 years and he's successful. Yeah. And he was always an actor from birth. As a child, if we were taking a picture, he would immediately get in the front and go like this. At 1, at 2, at 5, at 7, at 12, he would be in the front going, here I am. and so he was about 10 at that point.
He was 12, because that's when he had his bar mitzvah.
You're right, dear. Thank you.
It's the only thing I got right.
Thank you. And we dressed him up as an old-fashioned newsboy with a news bag. Mm-hmm. And we printed up 500 newspapers, which was easy for us to do, saying, extra, extra, read all about it, visit booth 100. Mm-hmm. And I directed him, and I said, show me how you're going to do it. He said, extra, extra, read all about it. I said, no. You got to go, extra, extra, read all about it, visit booth 100, see the newspapers. And he did it perfectly. He loved it because he was independent. Yeah. He went all around the 1 million square feet, meeting everybody. Everybody stopped him. He brought back gifts samples from everybody. They said, you're so great, take a sample. So his bag was full of samples. And with him was a lady from Dallas, Texas, yeah, who was opening up.
Right, we didn't know her yet.
We never met her. Who was opening up a festival marketplace called the West End Marketplace, which was in 1987. You may not know about it because it's now closed.
Yeah, It's closed now.
And she said, we need you in Dallas for this use, this newspaper use. And we refused 3 times, but we befriended them. Their name is Joanne and Steve Levy. They're wonderful people. Steve is a famous dentist in town, and Joanne is a famous entrepreneur in town. She has opened up restaurants and businesses, and they became our fast friends. To make that long story short, I moved. Oh, I said, no, 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 no. And then they said, well, how about 2 stores on the first floor? I said, no. How about 3 stores on the first floor? I said, now you're talking. I said, but I don't really have the money to fly there and build. We'll build them for you. We won't charge you X amount of rent for 6 months. I said, okay, Barbara, let's give this a shot. So I commuted on the weekday. I came home on the weekends. It became so successful that I moved everybody to Texas. And however, when you're an entrepreneur, success is short-lived. And it lasted only a year and a half because management was poor and there were some fights down there and the police couldn't stop it. It closed. We were in Texas without a job, without an income. What to do for the next idea? And now I remember. I'm sorry, dear. Go ahead, you pitch in.
Yeah, so I had to look for a job at
Yes.
that time, and I found one. Let me just stop that. I found a job because I was looking for one, and it was I met a young man who has his own thing, and we were friends for a while.
Was it cars?
No.
I don't recall.
And I just met him, and I met him at a bar.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. And so we became friends. And he said to me, oh, hey, what do you do? Do you work or anything like that? I was sitting in the bar. I said, no, I'm not working. Gee, I need somebody like you, do you know this, and this? I said, oh, yeah, sure, I know everything that you're saying to me. Well, can you come and work for me? I said, yeah. This was a person that I came to work for before I went back. Anyway, I worked for him, and it turns out that we two got together, the two of us. I'm losing my throat. And he said, I need somebody that can talk and show and talk and show, not just drink beer or something like that. As it turned out, he was very, he's the one that opened the door for me, actually. I can't remember his name, but he opened the door and everything opened after that.
Okay, I don't remember what door that was.
Well, it was...
And I'm not being facetious.
No, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, it was, I don't know what you call it, but he had friends that needed some help also, and we were going to try to do, what is it called? It's called something very...
Well, here's the sequence that I remember.
Go ahead.
Okay?
What's the
sequence that I remember? We had 3 stores. We had Headlines Around the World, which was the printing novelty newspaper. We opened up a business called High Tech's Watch Company. And that's a whole interview in itself. And then we opened up a business called Poster America. There was not one place in Texas where you could buy posters. Marlon Brando, Marilyn Monroe, Easy Rider, rock groups, etc. Anything that you could. And so when the mall closed, when the West End Marketplace closed, this turned out to be a good business, so we opened up several mall stores called Poster America. We chose all the wrong malls.
No.
We chose Prestonwood Mall, which is now no longer there. We chose Valley View Mall, which is no longer there. We chose Town East Mall, which is for East Texans, which is not for us. They didn't know who Marilyn Monroe was. And then we were invited into, you probably never have heard of, a mall called North Park. And it was too expensive for us.
Oh.
And we didn't think that our posters could pay the rent. And but we also, at that time, and we had a 3-4-year run. And then things started going downhill. Things always go downhill. I am a terrible businessman. She's a very good businessman. I have ideas, but I think that my ideas are living children. How can you abandon a living child? Let's invest money in it. It's going to be great someday. I believe in this child. Let's invest more money in it. And by the time we were through, we were bankrupt. I mean, really bankrupt. And so, with all this stuff that sounded so exciting in the beginning.
But
Go ahead, dear.
okay. But the guy that I
Yeah.
met at the bar,
Yeah.
he wanted to hire me, and he said let's do some things together. And
Network.
Network.
That's correct.
He put me into a network, and I was very familiar with networking, and it became just incredible. Everything, like if I was in charge of whatever I was in charge with.
You're in charge of art.
Art, that's right.
But let me tell, and you're absolutely right. The reason why she was invited in is because we had these stores. And we were when you're seen every day and a famous person would come in and buy a watch or a thing, you become friendly with them because we're both very talkative and she's so nice. You want to be her friend. And we were the first store to carry fossil watches. I mean, every story has a side story. We had a kiosk in the mall. As you walk in, we had the best locations at the West End Marketplace. A guy walks in one day, he says, I am importing the most beautiful watches from China, and I have them in shoe boxes in my garage in Plano. Mm-hmm. And he says, won't you please look at what you're selling? You're selling Swatch, you're selling Guess, you're selling Tag Heuer. We sold really good watches. He says, won't you give my watches a chance? Because we were getting 1,000 visitors a day. We go up to his place in Plano, and in his garage are, I'd say 1,000 shoe boxes. But not shoe boxes, just gray boxes with a number on them, just from floor to ceiling. I said, where the hell did you get all these boxes? He says, I go to China and I invest them. I said, what's the name of your company? He said, Fossil. I said, man, you're going to go out of business and look at all the stock you have.
Yeah, Fossil.
I mean, come on. I
and
said, of course.
Pouring in.
Yeah, I said, come on. Put them in our shop. Put as many as you want in our shop. He put them in the shop. They walked out every day. And that's the story of Fossil Watch.
What was his name?
I don't remember his name.
No, I don't either.
I don't remember his name.
But what I'm saying is, then I got into a certain business because I had to this man that wanted me to help him with whatever he had, I was able to go into certain places and tell them who I am, and this is what we do, and this is, and it worked out great. I sell this, I sell that, I sell this, I sell that, and bingo.
She was great. And I don't say that, what's the word, when you say someone's great, what is the word? It's like, I'm not being...
Patronizing?
I'm patronizing her.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I am not patronizing my wife. You know why? She has a left, and she sometimes hits me with a left, and I don't know it, and I'm on the floor, so I never patronize her.
What year did you both meet? I've learned so much, and I love this, but you said it took 3 years for you guys to get married or finally get together. When did you all meet?
By the way,
We're married.
I must interrupt. First of all, the medication for Alzheimer's, there's only one really. The others just retard the disease.
Yeah.
But the one essential is laughter.
Yeah.
And music.
And music, and love.
And love.
And so I am the silliest person I could possibly be all day long. Because that's another apple. That's another little piece of lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
That's another, in her system. So
I had to go on and see. I asked this guy, what do we need? We need somebody that can do the telephones, just whatever.
talking about creating an office, creating a business. They need telephones, they need carpeting, they need furniture, they need lighting.
And when you're sitting there and you're talking, you have to find somebody that you can bring in to do that. And so whenever I was in this with this guy, we went together, and whatever I said, I brought in, and then I brought in this person, and I was able to bring in that person, and we had like a monthly, or a weekly, meeting, and every time that because I was the art person. Nobody had the art. They had the not the television. They had the phones. They had the what do you call it? So many things. So many things.
Bob, I'm going to change the sequence of when this happened, and I'm going to tell everybody, and I want to tell you 2 stories, and then you could end this session, if you'd like to. You asked about when we met.
Yes.
I and my friend Matt, he had a brand new Impala red, it was called Cherry Red at that time, Impala convertible, the ultimate car. So he got me a blind date, and he had his girlfriend. And he said, let's take a ride out to West Hampton from Queens, which was 100 miles. And he loved to drive his car. So me and this girl, very nice girl, but we didn't get along. And I don't remember why. And he and his girl. So by the time we get out to the Hamptons, it's late. It's like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. And we go to a bar called the Point House, which was where everybody hung out from New York. And mostly Jewish people, because you knew you could meet Jewish people there. And that's the way it was in the 70s, and that's just the way it was. And so we go to this bar, and he's sitting at the table with his girlfriend, and we're all having a drink, and I said, I'm just going to go play some music. in the jukebox. And it was 3 plays for a quarter. And I go up to the jukebox, and I try to put my quarter in, and it slips and falls on the floor. I bend down to pick up the quarter, and someone steps on it. I look up, and I see her. And I said to her, quote, "What do I have to do to get my quarter back?" And what did you say?
You have to play my music,
That's correct. Your song.
my song.
And what was the name of the song?
It was To Be With You.
By?
What's his name?
You tell me.
I don't never remember his name.
By Joe Cuba. Because there was a real Latin influence in New York, you know, because it was such a melting pot. We were always doing Latin dancing.
I love Latin.
We were always, either disco at the Ginza or Studio 54, or we went into Harlem and took a chance and did Latin dancing. I said, I'll do that. I'm going to play your song. I put the quarter in, and I play To Be With You by Joe Cuba, which I had never heard of. And it was the most beautiful song I had ever heard. And I actually fell in love at that moment. I knew I was going to marry her. And coincidentally, she knew she was going to marry me. She went over to her girlfriends and said, "Give that guy my number on a matchbook. I can't go over again." And one of her girlfriends, I think it was Ricky,
Whoever it was.
said, "Here's her number. Don't look at her. She's embarrassed." And I took the number and I said, "Thank you very much." And I didn't look at her, because I didn't want to be that obnoxious to the other girl. And I went home, and the next morning I called her. I said, "Would you like to go to the beach? I'll teach you how to body surf."
When I
You
heard
know.
that body surf thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Be
that
careful.
was a little sexual. I mean, it was actually a lot sexual. Because in order to teach somebody how to body surf, you know, you had to hold on to their body. So she didn't say no to anything. So I meet her, I go to her house in Flushing, and how was I dressed?
You were dressed, okay, like he was going out for,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Do we just run rolling? Today is June 20th, 2018. We are continuing the interview with Melvyn and Barbara Bernstein. And we left off, I believe, talking about your first date. And Barb, let's start with you, my friend.
okay. What would you like me to start with?
When you opened the door, and you remember you telling me you opened the door and he was wearing something that was quite out of the ordinary, but
He was dressed up like he was going to I guess a party. I guess a party. He was all dressed up, you know, and but he was going to the beach. So I couldn't understand why he had all that stuff on. He had a beautiful shirt on, he had pants on, and this was in the morning, and he had beautiful shoes and everything like that. I said, "Where are we going?" So he told me that we're going to the beach. The beach. And which beach was it?
Jones Beach.
Oh, Jones Beach. Okay, so we were going to Jones Beach, and I said, "Well, okay, you know, Jones Beach is a great beach." So anyway, what else?
I mean, that's basically it, if you want to be more specific.
Well, how long did we date before you popped the question to her? Before you asked her to marry?
Oh, that's a different story. Barbara, you go with that.
I don't know, he did.
Bob, I dated her for 3 years. I was still in college. And I said, there's no way I can get married before I graduate college and get a job. She was already a working woman. And that was fine for a while. But we had many breaking up meals, special meals.
Steak meals they were.
Date meals or steak. We had steak at this one place.
Right.
And garlic rolls.
Right.
And I don't remember the name of the place, but I said, listen, I've got to talk to you. Let's go to Charlie's. And, because she said, oh, that's great. Let's have a steak. And we always wound up crying. We never ate the steak. I said, if you need to go away, you need to go away. But I love you, but I cannot get married. I'm still in college. And she would be sobbing and wouldn't eat the steak, and I never ate my steak. And we did this many times. So Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, negative results. Anyway, do you remember what you did to cement that I would ask you to marry me?
Well, I said, it wasn't at the beach.
No, dear. This was 3 years later.
Okay. I said, well, it's time, It's, we've been together quite a while, and I think we're ready to call it a day. And you said, well, I can't because I have too much to do in school. Still, you had something going on. Something.
Finals.
Oh, finals. That's what it was. And he had to be there and do that and all that. So I said okay, and so I said okay. And when you're done, just give me a call, and let's see if we can get together. So that was probably another day or two before that.
Do you want me to tell the real story? Here's the real story, Liz. Barbara gave me an ultimatum. She said, let's get married or I'm moving to California with Roberta, her best friend.
And I did.
And Roberta had just broken up with her boyfriend. And they made a vow. We're going to California. We are not calling them. Let's wait to see if they call us. And sure enough, they moved to Sunset Strip. And they were both gone. And I missed her terribly. So I called her one night. I had a few beers. That is an understatement.
More beers.
And she was glad to hear me. And actually, Liz, let me retract that. Roberta, her best friend, says, I'm going out to get pizza pie. Do not, under any circumstances, call Mel, because it was her first chance to be alone and make a telephone call. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, she called me. It was a Saturday night. I was home at my home in Bayside, Queens. I was still living at home. And she said, hi. I said, hi, how are you? I miss you. She says, I miss you too. She says, let's make this a quick call because if Roberta comes back in, she'll never speak to me again.
That's right. And she didn't speak to me for a couple of years.
And I said, I love you. I want to marry you. She says to me, you sound drunk. call me tomorrow morning and say the same thing to me. Needless to say, when Roberta came back, she had egg on her face. And Roberta said, "You called him."
She couldn't see. I couldn't hide it. I couldn't hide it.
And she said yes. And Roberta was so insulted, they didn't speak for years and years and years.
A couple of years, and I was so upset. I was so upset. And I mean, I love the girl. She was sick. She got sick.
She got MS.
She has MS. And she really was very sick because her husband, she had a husband at that time.
Harvey.
Took her everywhere in the United States to find out how she can get better. And they couldn't find anything for her. And so I was so upset because I was so sorry that she was so sick.
Speak a little louder, dear.
Just because there's other stuff going around, just a little bit up. You're doing great.
No, I loved her. I really did. And so we had such, we were in where was your parents?
They lived in Florida, probably Fort Lauderdale. They were wealthy. They owned the barbecue pit, which was a very famous place in Florida. And
so we were together for every time when she came, we were together. We couldn't leave each other. And then when she got really sick, I stayed. I went with her when her husband took her to New Hampshire and went boating.
well, not when she was really sick, but when she was still doing okay, they had a barbecue pit in Lake Winnipesaukee, New Hampshire.
Right.
And wherever Harvey and Roberta were, they had two girls.
Right.
And our boys loved those girls because they were like a year or two older.
Well, they were very sweet girls.
And they were beautiful, sweet girls. And Harvey was affluent. He had a plane, he had a big boat. Lake Winnipesaukee is a huge lake. And we would just go up, and every night the families would stay together.
Did you call back the night afterward? Did you call back the next morning and ask her?
I did.
Okay.
I did. And she said yes. I said, "Come home." And she came home. I don't know whether it was a day later or 2 days later, but that was it.
I think I said, are you sure? Are you sure you're whatever I asked you? I don't know. And you said, "Yes, I'm sure." So I don't know what I said after that.
You said, "I'll be home."
Oh.
When was the big day?
But I couldn't have.
When did we get married, dear?
We got married. Let's see. We got married in December.
December 10th.
Right.
What year?
1967.
That is correct.
Where did you all get married?
We married. I don't know when we got married.
My father and mother were very, very special people. Let's establish that all fathers and mothers mean their best, and they do the best they can. And however, my father and mother were very, very special people. Barbara did not have a family to speak of. Her mother was a working woman. Her father left the family very, very early, just disappeared. And Barbara became a working girl very early in life. And Barbara literally brought her brother up, Jeffrey, who was several years younger than her. And
I'm just going to pause you right now. This is go ahead, Richard.
so Barbara was a caregiver at a very early age. You know, we will not get into personalities, but Barbara's mother, Ruth, meant well, but she needed companionship. And she became a boyfriend of this man who was a very powerful man in the garment center industry. And he would, what's the word? He would
Do anything she wanted.
furs, jewels, the
Everything.
best restaurants, New York, the Copacabana, going away. And so Barbara was the woman of the house.
Yeah.
And so when Barbara and I got married, my parents became her parents. They accepted her as a daughter. And that was one of the reasons why we have stuck together so long. We had the same parents. And
Where did you get married? Was it in New York? In Flushing? Or?
we got married at the Bayside Jewish Center in Bayside, Queens. My father was a working man, and he worked for this huge company, printing company. I guess it wasn't huge. It was huge then, but not in the standards of today. There were probably 150 people that worked in this offset printing plant. And so my father invited every person that worked at the printing plant. They had a huge family. Everybody was alive. All the children were together. Everybody was together. He invited all of those. My parents had friends, a whole clique of friends in Bayside, Queens. He invited all of those. And on and on and on. I think there were 300 people at the Bayside Jewish Center. It was this, and you know, I didn't even know then, you know, looking back on it, I'm embarrassed that my father spent so much money on our wedding. And, but that was just the kind of guy he still is, probably up there. You know, he's probably made 1,000 friends. I don't know how that works. And my mother, if there's food to buy or make, my mother's making it.
She made the dinner for the wedding?
No, this was a super catered affair.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother used to search out in Queens or Brooklyn the best fried chicken, kosher fried chicken, the best latkes, the best everything. And the best cakes, Ebinger's cakes were famous. So she would buy 5, 6 cakes. Why? Because when her sisters who lived, everybody moved near her.
She had several sisters.
And they had several children. Everybody got wind that Esther just went shopping for the weekend. So all our cousins would come over. By the time they left, there was nothing but chicken bones and empty Ebinger's boxes. And she loved that. That was the joy of her life.
When you saw her for the first time at the wedding, when the wedding started, when you saw her for the first time, what was going through your head?
You know, I was so young, Liz, that I was looking at my girlfriend in this dress. And I didn't view her, I knew the word wife. I knew we were getting married. I wasn't completely living under a rock. I knew there was a rabbi there that we would be saying, but I saw my girlfriend. The girlfriend that I had been going out with for 3 years, and we had been doing great fun things that really made us bond. I would take her to crazy, strange places in the United States, doing things that people don't normally do. Climbing mountains, riding rivers. Barbara and I have ridden most of the major rivers in the United States, rapid rivers with levels. And
but before that, when I came back with the pizza.
No, she came back with the pizza.
Oh,
We're going back now.
Sorry,
Roberta came back with the pizza.
Right.
Now, I don't know about that. Tell me, did you eat the pizza? Or did you both just cry? Or was the pizza ruined? Tell me what you remember.
I remember that Roberta started crying and I started crying because she knew that I loved you, and she knew that I loved her, and it was so hard when she came back. It was so hard. But anyway, we lasted. We rented an apartment for like a day or two because we knew we weren't going to stay. And so when she came back, we had to make a decision. She said, if you can't do this, or something like that, if you don't do what you said, I'm gonna go home. She said, I'm gonna go home. As it turned out, she did go home, and I did not go home. I did not go home right away because I was there and I was having a good time. I felt good because everything was just going right for me. After this we went through this, but yeah, and that was that. And so I kept the apartment, for 2 or 3 more days, and I came home. And then I called you when you called me, or we spoke.
I picked you up at the airport.
Okay, you picked me up at the airport, and I can't remember that, but so then I said to you, I don't know, where were we? What about the what do you call it? The song.
The song, I think I told Liz about the song. This very special song that she asked me to play.
Was that your song at the wedding, like when you danced?
No, no one would have known. They would have said, "What the heck?" Because this was a very very hip Latin song, and slow. Our song was
To Be With You.
No, dear.
No, okay.
Our wedding song was a Billy Joel. Oh, don't go changing, da 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 da, and that was our song for the wedding.
Just the way you are.
Just the way you are. Yes.
Oh yeah.
So, when did you guys have your first child?
Let's see. When we got married, I think it came pretty quickly.
And you were still in New York, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in Brooklyn. I think I.
No, dear.
I.
No, we were in Queens when we had our first
Queens.
child.
All right, Queens.
Joshua.
Right, Queens. Okay.
And I guess we married about 2 years, and I don't know where we want to go with this, but there's a lot of bumps in our road.
How many children, so did you just have Joshua when you guys moved to Dallas, or with that?
Oh no, we had 3 grown men.
3 grown men before you
Yeah.
moved to. So when did you move to Dallas? What year did you move to Dallas?
Do you remember, Bob?
1967.
No, it was
No.
1987.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Don't.
67.
So you moved
We got
to,
married in 67.
why did you guys decide to move to Dallas?
Barbara?
Because, why did we want to move to Dallas? Because we were offered, and a friend of mine made me an offer to open up, what's it called? Open up
A store?
a store. It wasn't a store, but let's say a store. Let's use that. And because she wanted me to run it, and I said, "Oh my God, I didn't know." So.
Well, here's how it happened. We had a very famous store that we were running on Central Avenue in Cedarhurst, Long Island, Nassau County. And it was called the Chambered Nautilus. And the Chambered Nautilus is a seashell. And it's a very famous seashell. A lot of architecture, math, thinking, Archimedes, Michelangelo, so many things have emanated from the inside. When you split a chambered nautilus in half, it's perfection. If they say there's no perfection in life, the chambered nautilus is the closest thing, the inside. It swirls. And that's the closest thing to perfection that man has ever seen. Architecture is built on that premise. Math is built on that premise. Balance, building rooms and stuff is built on that premise. It's an extraordinary seashell. And we had a seashell store out. That's okay for us.
It's all right.
But I know she's a filmmaker.
Go
ahead. Anyway, we opened up the store. We're really, you can think of us as gypsies, please. Going here, going there, wherever the weather was good, wherever if the opportunity was here, we went there. I would go in and I would say to the person, "Here's what I do," and they would say, "You're crazy, get out," or "That is a fabulous idea, I want you in my store to do what you're doing." And so we opened up our first seashell shop in Amagansett, Long Island, and it was called the Chambered Nautilus. And then when we left there, we opened up a bona fide store in Cedarhurst, Long Island, called the Chambered Nautilus. And, and so we started printing headlines in the Chambered Nautilus in 1979. That's over 40 years ago. I bought a press, I bought the letters, I went to Times Square where the old timers were doing it, and I picked some guy's brain. I said, "Do you mind if I watch you print?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely not." He was really old. And so I learned the trade. Then I brought it to the store. And then I had an idea that I wanted to make huge greeting cards that I could personalize. Have I told you this?
No.
Oh, huge greeting cards that I would personalize, that we would personalize. We were partners. We did everything together. However, I had no knowledge of the greeting card industry. And a large card was an automatic failure, because everything in the greeting card industry is based upon how many cards this size you can sell in that bin. And that's the way the greeting card industry is calculated. To have a big card takes up 3 or 4 spaces, and it's not economical, and no one would buy it. But anyway, we invested in point-of-purchase displays. And we rented a booth at the Jacob Javits Convention Center in New York with our newspaper cards. We dressed our baby up, Jesse. He was 12 at that time.
Right.
We dressed him up as a newsboy in knickers, a newsboy's hat with a news thing, and I printed 100, 200 newspapers. It read, extra, extra, read all about it, booth 100, headlines around the world. And I said to him, I said, listen, let me hear how you're going to do it. And right off the bat, he's an actor today, successful actor. He went, extra, extra, read all about it, come to booth. I said, perfect. Just go wherever you want and do that. And he brings back this lady from Dallas, Texas. I don't think I should mention her name.
No, I can mention her name.
Go ahead.
Joanne Levy.
Yeah. And she was the head rental person. She says, I need you to bring this to Dallas, Texas. We're opening up the West End Marketplace. I said, no, thank you. We said, no, thank you. She said, why don't you come for a weekend? On me. And we went, and we had a fine time because they were a wonderful couple.
They took care of everything.
And they took us everywhere. And her husband, Steve, was a dentist, who's our dentist now, 30 years later. And we refused. She called us again. She said, why don't you come one more time? I said, absolutely. Came one more time. They took us to different places, showed us different areas of Dallas, Texas. And I said, Joanne, I cannot do this. I can't. New York is New York, and Dallas is, to us, a stranger in a strange land. Leon Russell's song. So then she finally made us an offer we couldn't refuse. She said, why don't you open up 3 stores at the West End Marketplace? I'll put you all on the first floor, and you'll have the best spots in the marketplace. And I said, that's a good idea. So, and they built it out for us. I didn't have to invest a penny. And they gave us free rent. So we discussed it, and I commuted from New York to Dallas, Texas for about 5 months. And I said, this thing is amazing. It's thousands of people every day. They've never seen a festival marketplace.
It was like Christmas every day.
Yeah.
Because they'd never seen what we put up. It was just, we put up in the store.
Yeah, well, our retail uses. We did the headlines, we did a watch company, and we did Poster America. They had never seen any of that.
Where was this located?
In the historic district of downtown Dallas. It is still the historic district, but everything is closed, and retail down there is at a 0 point. When the market was open, the West End Marketplace was open, everything was fantastic.
Crazy.
And very successful. And so that's how we got to Texas. Through someone recruiting us, and Jesse bringing this person to our booth,
right,
and her inviting us to Texas.
What's the name of the business?
Well, we had 3 businesses.
What's the name of the printing business?
The printing business at that time was called Headlines Around the World. But we changed it when .com came in because that was too long. So we made it personalheadlines.com.
What kind of events have you done with this company? Like what kind of different venues or different like bar mitzvahs, birthdays?
We've done from one headline to having a headline on Mount Everest.
That's right.
Someone folded it, put it in his thing, in one of his ski pockets, and he made it to the summit, and it was in magazines and so on and so forth. Dealing with Fortune 500 companies.
Was he the doctor?
Who, dear?
Wasn't he the doctor that did that?
Beck Weathers, no.
Oh,
No, it wasn't. It
he
wasn't
wasn't a
him.
doctor?
No, this was just a climber who found out about us. And so we've done Fortune 500 companies where we printed 1,000 newspapers. When we do that, I don't print them. I then subcontract a real newspaper company who sets everything up, and then I sell it to the client. And we've done that for many companies, many bar mitzvahs, many weddings, many bat mitzvahs. But the bread and butter of our business is the one headline that is ordered by Aunt Molly out in Florida, wishing her 90-year-old sister a happy birthday, and either calling us or ordering it online. We print it and we mail it to her sister. And our motto is, we sell smiles. When you receive one of our products, you either laugh or you smile. The smile is a big smile. And we're still doing that as we speak.
Yeah, we are.
And you're still located in historic Dallas, downtown Dallas?
We are now located in my garage, our garage, because we moved about 5 years ago from a really nice house in White Rock Lake. We just couldn't afford it, to a townhouse which has a really big garage at the bottom level. So I do all my work now out of that garage.
If there's one thing you could, your marriage is over, how long have you guys been married? You've been married for over 40 years?
Over 50
Over
years.
50 years.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. What is one piece of advice you could give to people about making a successful, having a successful marriage, through the ups and downs, through, all the bumps in the road? What's one thing you could always tell somebody, just for their future insight, how to make a marriage successful and just to keep going through it, if that makes sense? How to keep it on the right track?
Bob?
Well, I don't know exactly, but I'll just throw a couple of things out. Okay. Well, when that happened, we went out. We were in. Let me see. When did the what do you call it? Song that I wanted you to play when you dropped the coin.
Oh, To Be With You?
Yeah.
Yes, what about it?
So what time of year? When was that?
Oh, that was in 1964, in the summertime.
Okay.
But the question is, what do you attribute to the fact that we've stayed together through thick and thin? What do you attribute to that? It could be one word, it could be 10 words.
I see. I don't know, we were just we were just easy with each other. We're just easy,
Actually, that's not true. I was much harder on her. She was the easiest woman to live with. I was so lucky. God sent her down to me. I was a difficult man, and she was an easy person, but you were also a what person?
Also a what person?
Yeah. What goes through your soul? What goes through your heart all the time?
Love?
That's correct. She's a loving person. And
Can't help it.
And, the Beatles song may be very correct. All you need is love.
Yep.
But there's so many bumps in the road. Sometimes love it's covered. It just gets covered. It's swept away because of the difficulties. So I would say it's a complex question. You can't live without love. But for me, forgiveness is the biggest word. And to forgive and forget. And so at my age, I am still living, I'm still learning and growing. I'm getting better at it each day to forgive and forget.
When you both have been through, are extremely successful in all the businesses you guys have gone through, from starting with your father's business to opening up your own business and shops in New York. What's one piece of advice you would give to future entrepreneurs in regards to competition, in regards to rejection when it comes to a pitch getting rejected, things like that? What's one piece of advice you would give to future entrepreneurs and future generations when it comes to the struggle of businesses and being a businessman and owner?
Okay. Well, everybody has an idea, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody probably has many, many ideas through the course of a day, a week, a month, a year. And what you really need to do is if you have a partner, you got to run it past your partner, and then the both of you will either say yay or nay. Or if the partner says nay, you need to discuss that. Why don't you think this is a good idea? I have been, quite frankly, overruling Barbara on the idea scale forever. And what I mean by that is, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. You can cut this out or leave it in. And what I mean by that is I say to her, I've got an idea. And it could be passing. A true entrepreneur is kind of like what are those things in the springtime that you blow on them?
Bubbles?
Bubbles?
No, not a bubble. It's a plant. And the white things.
Wildflower? Or?
It's a wildflower, but it's got white things, and they get caught in the wind.
I thought that was a wildflower.
Okay, maybe it is a wildflower. Yeah. And they go floating in the wind, and they'll pass 100 trees and 100 this, and they'll land somewhere. So entrepreneurs have that kind of whimsical, wispy thoughts in their head. They have millions of ideas. They need to run it past people. But in our case, we needed to run it past each other first.
Yeah.
And Barbara would say to me, for example, I would say to her, I am going to stop in that store. I'm going to meet the owner, and I'm going to ask the owner if I could set up tables on her front lawn during the summertime to sell seashells. Because it was a farmer's market, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people shopping, and it was the only farmer's market. And Barbara said to me, what?
I think you're making a mistake. This was going out to where we're at.
In the Hamptons.
In the Hamptons. So I said, I think she's not going to want you to do that.
You're actually stronger about it. You said you're wasting your time. She'll never. And this example goes for everything. This one example. It's an umbrella. And I went in, and it was a busy Saturday because everybody goes out to the Hamptons for the weekend. And I said, where is the owner? Pat Struck. She came up to me. I said, Pat, my name is Mel Bernstein, and I sell seashells. could I rent your front lawn and put up some tables? She said, that is a great idea. When can you start? I went back to the car. In 4 minutes, I said, we're in business. That umbrella covers all entrepreneurship. You have to have the courage to ask a question.
Open your mouth.
Make a presentation. Open your mouth. If you have to research it first, make a business plan if it's that complex. But if it's a simple thing where two people can make money, and a lot of young entrepreneurs don't understand that there's a symbiosis involved. That if you make money, someone next to you is going to be making money. If you make a lot of money, someone next to you is also going to make a lot of money. And so the network of being an entrepreneur is not a single person. It's definitely a team player. You get the idea, and again, everybody has ideas, but I guess 0.1% of young entrepreneurs or truly an entrepreneur begin to try that idea.
And we were lucky. We were lucky when she said yes, and the
Luck, I don't know. In Jewish, they say it's b'she'et. You walked in.
Okay, yeah, but on the street that we did it on in Montauk.
I'm against it.
I'm against it.
Okay.
Montauk. They're both the same.
Okay.
All right. It's just one single street. One single street. So if you go up and you're going to stop at the store, you're going to come back and you're going to stop at the store again. It was a wonderful thing because that's the only person, that was the only one that was back and forth.
And that's a very important point also. Look at the logistics of the thing. We've learned we failed a lot, Liz. Don't say that everything we've done has turned to gold. We've failed a lot. And we have started over from scratch a lot. So if you're not that kind of person who can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again, you don't be an entrepreneur. Because that's exactly what you're going to have to do. And so the logistics of it, Barbara's absolutely right. Montauk Highway went out to the end of Long Island, and you'd have to come back the same way. But logistically, this was the only farmer's market in 1969 when we introduced, or 1970, I'm sorry, 1970. And so the idea comes first. The spark comes first. And then you begin to think about it, and then you can't sleep. And it builds within you. And then you share it with someone else, and if you have a partner, you share it with your partner. And your partner will sometimes say, that's just not a good idea. I don't agree with you. But then if you're really sure about it, and you can afford to do it, and really the affording of it really is how much is it going to cost you to start this? And do you have an equal amount in the bank? If you don't have those two, don't start it. Work at another job, make your saving, save, and if the idea still doesn't go away, go for it.
Well, we were very lucky because that one road, when they went out, they bought. When they came back, they bought again. They just kept, because there was no place else. And so that was great. And so, and that also helped me get Roberta back on the road. remember I told you I met this guy that knew my...
That's a fascinating story. Why don't you tell Liz?
Okay, so my best friend had MS. Okay.
This is the friend that left and they hadn't spoken,
Right.
I'd say for 10 years.
I haven't spoken to her for, let's say, 3 or 4 years.
It was
Well,
longer than that, but
well,
that's okay. That's a
whatever.
long time too.
Whatever it is. So I was very upset, and I was just standing outside one day, and this one guy came over.
At your store, at your thatched hut.
Yeah, my thatched hut. Okay, and I waited on him, and we got into a conversation, and I don't know how it started, but...
You remembered each other from school
Oh, is that what it
or
is?
from the garment center or somewhere. You knew each other as...
I knew him from somewhere, right, so I had to find out where from. And then I said, he said to me, oh no.
He said to you, have you seen Roberta?
Yeah, that's what he said. I said, Roberta? You know Roberta? He said, yes, yes. I said, where is she? And he said, well, she's home, she's sick. Her husband is taking her all over the world to try to get better.
A cure for MS.
Right, and that's exactly what he did. But she never got better. And so that was very, very hard for me to get, but because I didn't...
But anyway, the point is, she then called Roberta, and they both cried like babies over the phone when they spoke to each other. And that was the beginning of a new friendship for us. They immediately invited us out to Florida to stay as long as we want. That was the way Harvey was, and that was the way Roberta was.
They were so open and
Generous.
generous, and it was wonderful, just wonderful. So when I decided, when he told me, I asked him, how did I get on to Roberta with him? Well, I guess so. I'll say, do you know Roberta? Or he said, are you friends with Roberta? I didn't know who asked what. But anyway, he told me that she is sick, and I know where she is. She's home with her husband, and she's very sick. And I couldn't ask any more, you know. And so as it turned out, I went home. When we went home, I called her from home, and I had to find out how she was, and that's when Jesse Bernstein was in a coma. That's the same time when he was in a coma. Because I know.
I think your sequence is a little off, but you might tell Liz about that if she doesn't know about that. One of our sons
My youngest
got
son,
very ill.
and he had a car accident. And it wasn't him that he got hit. And so it was very hard on us, but
We were told he wasn't going to live.
yeah, and
He was going to UT, and his older brother Josh was at UT Law, and so, you know, we talked about bumps in the road, and
let me finish what I was going to say. I was going to say,
what, dear? But-
Harvey called me.
No, your sequence is off. This is when she was passing. She was in, Harvey called and said he would pick you up with his plane.
Right.
Roberta is passing and she'd like to see you.
Right.
This wasn't when you met Roberta first, and you said to Harvey, our son is in a coma in the
Right.
hospital in Austin, Texas.
Right.
I can't come.
That's exactly what I said.
Okay, I'm
Exactly. I was
just,
going to say exactly that.
sure,
That's right, embedded in my brain.
yeah. But what I'm saying is, we had good times before that happened
Oh, sure.
with the children.
Oh, of course.
It didn't happen when you first called her.
No.
We spent many times with her, seeing her disease progress from someone who couldn't walk well, to someone who walked with a cane, to someone who walked with a walker, to someone who finally had to breathe and have one of those chairs that had her whole life, you know. And so, but in terms of our thing, Jesse got in a terrible accident, and we spent about 8 days in the ICU with him. He was well, he was responsive within his wherever he was. You know, he had seizures, and you know, they tie you down with a sheepskin so that it doesn't tear your hands, and so thank God Jesse made it, and Jesse's success. You know, I mean, that's how crazy life is. A doctor says
He's not going to make it.
he's not going to make it. And the reason why he said he's not going to make it is he showed us a picture of his brain. And he said, you see all these white things in the picture? Those are parts of his brain. And he's had many, many parts of his brain just separated, because it's not one accident, it's several accidents. The head keeps on. I mean, I'm sorry that are we into I mean, our lives have been negative too. We're glad we're here today talking to you. We're joyful.
Oh, no, please, I'm listening. I'm on here.
Yeah.
Don't apologize.
And so he said, he was very kind about it, but he said the odds are against him because he has so much loss, brain loss. Do you want to tell Liz what happened when you were in the room with him alone?
Yeah, it was my turn to get into, stand and watch him. And I sat down for a little while, and he had not gotten up yet. So I just was waiting and waiting, and just praying, and all of a sudden, he stood up. In his bed. And I said, oh my God, I almost had a heart attack, because no one said that he was going to make it, and you gotta listen to the doctors. But it was just amazing. It was truly amazing.
He said, Mom! And that's what scared you.
Well, whatever. You weren't in there with me.
No, you were in there alone, but
Yeah.
he said, Mom, and that was it. He was up. And of course, then you have to go through how he's going to be, what he's lost, and so on and so forth. Then the prognosis begins, you know.
But he was very lucky that it was.
Oh, he wasn't lucky, he was blessed.
Yeah.
God wanted him to live.
Oh, I know.
God wanted him to live.
Did the Jewish community, you were in Dallas at the time, you were living in Dallas at the time, did the Jewish community ever come by? Anyone from them, did you look for solace with a rabbi? Did you talk to anybody just to keep them in their prayers?
We were in Austin, and a rabbi came by every day. And this neurologist who told us that he wasn't going to live, actually, it's even stranger than that. One of the hospital guys, the neurologist, sat and showed us the picture. And he said, you see all these spots? Those are pieces of Jesse's brain. That doesn't look good. And then, through the grapevine, a Jewish neurologist came from a synagogue in Austin, and he sat with us, and he commiserated with us, and a rabbi came, and they say prayers over Jesse. And then I called him one night, and they had invited us to Sabbath. And back then, I didn't understand, I didn't realize the importance of the Sabbath, that it's the queen. And you don't say no to the queen. And so he had his hand over the phone, and he was talking to his wife about inviting us over. He said, "Honey, I have the Bernsteins on the phone." She says, "Who are the Bernsteins?" He said, "Remember the kid I told you wasn't going to live?"
Oh, God.
I heard that on the phone.
That's what you hear.
I heard that on the phone.
It was terrible, but he really made it out. He made it out. I mean, he got...
Well, he went from Brackenridge to St. David's to Health South. And he relearned how to walk. He relearned how to swim.
Yeah.
He relearned how to talk.
Yeah. He couldn't talk, he couldn't walk.
And I have to tell you this. He was a film major, cinema major, at UT. And even in his brokenness, he said to us at Health South, "Can you get, he was learning how to talk.
He couldn't talk.
He said, "Can you get me a camera? I want to film some of my friends here and make a documentary about what happens when you have a closed head injury." And even then, he had the filmmaker in him. So we felt fabulous about that. And when he recuperated, he missed a year of UT. He said he didn't want to go back to UT. I said, "Where do you want to go?" He said, "I'd like to go to Sydney, Australia, and go to the University of Sydney Film School."
That's where
And
he
we
went.
sent him there.
Yeah.
And he went to film school in Sydney.
And
At
he-
that time, Liz, they said the window is this open, and it closes very quickly. And when the window closes, that's what you're left with in your brain. They were completely wrong. You can always continue to rebuild a broken brain. And they told us the window will close, a month from now or 2 months from now. Whatever Jesse is left with is what he'll be left with. And they were completely wrong. Medicine was completely wrong, because he decided to go out to Hollywood and remember scripts. And because he had, when he right after the accident, he had no short-term memory whatsoever.
And he
None,
was-
zero.
And he had just gotten a job with
The agency,
with the agency, with
the guy here, Bob Phillips.
Oh, yeah.
Got a job. Do you know who Bob Phillips is? Bob Phillips is the country reporter. He's been on TV for 40 years. And he goes all around Texas and does exactly what you want to do. He makes these short, he's very famous. And Jesse was doing something, and he said, and I watched on TV, I said, "Jesse, you have to call Bob Phillips and tell him you just had a brain injury.
That's
and
right,
you're a
that's
filmmaker and you're coming back." Bob Phillips hired him. He went around with Bob Phillips.
Yeah.
This is the way our life
On the
has
radio,
been.
on the radio, yeah.
Oh, well, he was on the radio before then. I don't know what to say to you, Liz. You've heard one pin, the head of a pin, of what our lives have been like.
We haven't told you, we have, our other son passed away.
And so,
So we've
I love every single thing you've told me. It's fantastic. Do you think, last question, but do you think that, having, being Jewish, having that sort of like culture behind you has helped you through those tough times? Had to have some sort of solace with having a connection with Judaism, with Hashem. Do you think that's helped you? You said a rabbi came to comfort you guys with Jesse. Do you think that's given you through the hard times and just through life in general? Do you think Judaism and the Jewish community have been there to have your back? If that makes sense.
1,000%. And really, in thinking about my answer of marriage, you said marriage. You said not like the union. The union is, God has a lot to do with that. But the most religious people and Orthodox people get divorced also. So they talk to God every day. My relationship with God is I wrestle with him. I fight with him. I've had very difficult times with him. I've called him every name under the sun. And yet he still forgives me. He still loves me. And so as I grow older, I am first learning the beauty, I guess that word isn't even enough, the beauty of being, of Judaism, the glue of Judaism, the spark. People used to say to me, you don't go to shul? I said, well, I blah, blah, blah. I said, but I have a spark in my heart. It's called a pintel yid. It's a spark deep in your heart. And no one, even if I don't go to shul, can ever take that away from me. I'm a soldier for God. And I truly believe it's great to go to shul. It's great to learn. It's great to bring your children up religious, which we didn't after their bar mitzvah was over. But my children, every one of them, have a spark in their heart. They watch their grandpa, they watch their uncles, and they watch them in amazement. These people who danced all night and drank all night and hugged them every time and pinched their cheeks and asked them to show me how you dance, it was, they loved children and they loved their family. So I am so proud to have been born a Jew. I can't even fathom in the world that I live in being anything else but Jewish.
Huh.
That was fantastic. Wow. Thank you all so much for coming back today and continuing this interview. It was fantastic, and we can't thank you all enough, and we can't wait to share your story with the Jewish community and future generations of the Jewish community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, I'll introduce you, or